My name is Maya. I'm 28 years old. Hey. And for the first time in my entire life, everything was finally going right for me. I was getting married to Michael, the kindest man I'd ever met. He was the type of person who remembered how you took your coffee, who called his mom every Sunday, who left little notes on the bathroom mirror just to make me smile. We'd just bought our first home together. A small two-bedroom house with a backyard where we planned to plant tomatoes and maybe get a dog someday. Simple dreams, but they were ours. After years of struggling and rebuilding myself from rock bottom, I finally felt like I was allowed to be happy, like I'd earned it. When I asked my younger sister Emma to be my maid of honor, she actually cried. Real tears streaming down her face as she threw her arms around me and said, "Yes, of course, yes." She told me she was so proud of me, so happy I'd found someone who truly loved me for who I was. I remember holding her in that moment, feeling this warmth spread through my chest, thinking that maybe, finally, we could be real sisters, not just to people who shared parents in a childhood home, but actual friends. Emma is 25, 3 years younger than me, and growing up, she was always the golden child. The pretty one. The popular one. The one who walked into rooms and made everyone turn and look. She had this confidence that I never could quite grasp, this way of making people fall in love with her without even trying. Our parents adored her fearlessness and her spirit. Meanwhile, I was just steady, responsible, boring Maya, who got good grades and followed the rules and never made waves. I'd spent most of my life feeling like I lived in Emma's shadow, even though no one ever said it out loud. At family dinners, conversations would revolve around Emma's latest adventure or her new boyfriend or some funny thing she'd said. I was the reliable one they didn't have to worry about, which sounds like a compliment. But sometimes it felt like being invisible. But during the wedding planning, something changed between us. We spent hours on the phone late at night, talking about centerpieces and flower arrangements and whether the bridesmaids should wear blush pink or dusty rose. She came with me to every dress fitting, held my hand when I got overwhelmed by all the decisions, and assured me over and over that Michael was lucky to have me, not the other way around. We laughed until we cried over ridiculous cake flavors. We stayed up until 2 in the morning addressing invitations and drinking cheap wine. She helped me practice my vows in her living room, coaching me through the parts where my voice got shaky with emotion. For the first time since we were little kids, sharing a bedroom and telling each other's secrets in the dark, I felt close to her, really close. I thought I finally had the sister relationship I'd always desperately wanted. I thought all those years of quiet jealousy and comparison were behind us. I thought we'd both grown up. I was so wrong. 6 years ago, when I was 22 and fresh out of college, I made a mistake that nearly destroyed my entire life. I was working at a small accounting firm, barely making enough to cover my rent and drowning in student loan debt that kept me awake at night. Every bill felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I was desperate to prove myself, to show everyone that I could make it in the real world, that all those years of being the responsible one actually meant something. My supervisor, a man named Richard, who wore expensive suits and always seemed so confident, pulled me into his office one afternoon. He asked me to adjust some numbers on a client report. Just small changes, he said. Routine stuff that happened all the time. He made it sound so normal, so harmless. And I was young and scared and wanted so badly to be seen as a team player. So I did it. I changed those numbers without asking questions. 3 months later, the company got audited. That's when I realized those small changes weren't routine at all. They were fraud. Actual criminal fraud. And my name was on those reports. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. I lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. I came forward immediately, told the investigators everything, cooperated completely with their investigation, because I was young and it was my first offense and I'd voluntarily confessed. The judge gave me a suspended sentence and 200 hours of community service instead of jail time. But I lost my job, my reputation, the career I'd worked so hard for, everything. The worst part wasn't the legal consequences. It was the shame. The way my parents looked at me when I had to tell them what I'd done. The way former classmates whispered when they saw me around town. The way I felt like I had criminals stamped across my forehead everywhere I went. I rebuilt my life from absolute nothing. I changed careers completely, went back to school for graphic design, worked 3 jobs simultaneously to pay off my debts and legal fees. There were months where I ate ramen for dinner every single night because that's all I could afford. Months where I cried myself to sleep wondering if I'd ever stop feeling like a failure. By the time I met Michael 4 years later, that dark period felt like it belonged to a completely different person. Someone I used to be. Someone I'd fought so hard to stop being. I was doing well in my new career. I'd paid off my debts. I'd volunteered hundreds of hours helping at-risk youth make better choices than I had. I'd worked so hard to become someone I could be proud of. But the guilt never completely went away. It lived in my chest like a cold stone, especially in quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts. 2 years ago. Emma and I were at her apartment after she'd gone through a brutal breakup. We were on our 2nd bottle of wine, and she was crying about feeling like a failure in relationships. I wanted to comfort her, to show her that everyone messes up, that mistakes don't define you forever. So I told her everything. About the fraud, the court case, the community service, the shame that had nearly swallowed me whole, the terror I still felt that people would find out, that I'd lose everything I'd rebuilt. She held me while I cried, mascara running down both our faces. She stroked my hair like Mom used to do when we were little, and she swore on everything sacred that she would never, ever tell another living soul. She said everyone deserves a second chance. She said I'd paid for my mistake 10 times over. She said my past didn't define who I was now. I felt such overwhelming relief. Finally sharing that burden with someone who loved me unconditionally. I actually believed she'd keep my secret safe. That was my second biggest mistake. 3 days before my wedding, I came home early from my final dress fitting. The seamstress had finished faster than expected, taking up the hem in half the time she'd predicted. I was actually relieved because my to-do list was still a mile long and was running on about 4 hours of sleep per night. I pulled into our driveway around 2 in the afternoon. Michael was at work and the house should have been empty. But Emma's car was parked on the street. She'd borrowed my spare key weeks ago to help set up some wedding decorations, and I figured she'd stop by to drop something off. I walked in through the front door quietly, already mentally organizing the rest of my day. Confirm final head count with the caterer. Pick up Michael's suit from the alterations place. Call the florist about the centerpieces. That's when I heard her voice coming from the living room. At first, I thought she was talking to me. But then I realized she was on the phone with someone, and something about her tone made me freeze in the hallway. My hand was still on the doorknob. I didn't even breathe. Her voice was cold, sharp, completely different from the warm, supportive sister who'd been by my side for months. It was a voice I'd heard before, years ago, when she was angry. But this was worse. This was calculated. "I'm going to tell everyone during the toast," she said, and my blood turned to ice water in my veins. About the fraud conviction. Can you imagine? Perfect Maya. The bride everyone thinks is so accomplished and put together. It's actually a criminal who got lucky she didn't go to prison. My legs went weak. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart hammering so violently I thought I might actually pass out right there in my own hallway. "Michael's family will be absolutely horrified," Emma continued, and I could hear the smile in her voice, the satisfaction. "His mother already thinks he's marrying beneath him. You should see the way she looks at Maya sometimes, like she's trying to figure out what her precious son sees in someone so ordinary. Wait until she finds out her new daughter-in-law is a fraud. Literally." The person on the other end must have asked if she was serious because Emma laughed. Actually laughed. It was this sharp, bitter sound that I'd never heard come out of her mouth before. My hands were shaking so badly, could barely pull my phone out of my purse. But somehow I managed to open the voice recording app. I hit record and held the phone toward the living room, praying she wouldn't hear the slight beep. "Of course, I'm serious," Emma said. "She took everything from me, Jessica. Everything. Our entire lives. Mom and Dad acted like I was the special one, the princess. But it was all fake. They were always more proud of Maya. She was the smart one, the responsible one, the one who actually made something of herself without drama or mess. I could hear her pacing now, her heels clicking against our hardwood floors. And you know what the worst part is? She never even tried. She just existed, and everyone loved her for it. I had to work so hard to get any attention, and even then it was always, why can't you be more like your sister? Do you know what that does to a person? Growing up in someone's shadow when you're supposed to be the pretty one, the fun one? My vision blurred with tears, but I kept the phone steady, kept recording. Now she gets the perfect wedding to the perfect guy with the perfect house and the perfect life. While I'm still single and living in a rental and working a job I hate. Emma's voice cracked with something that sounded almost like pain. Everyone's going to be there. All our relatives, all her friends, Michael's entire family. And they're all going to see who she really is. They're going to know that Saint Maya isn't so perfect after all. The recording captured everything. 4 minutes and 37 seconds of my sister explaining in explicit detail exactly how much she hated me and why she was about to ruin the happiest day of my life when she finally hung up and left through the back door. I stood in that hallway for 20 minutes, just holding my phone and crying silent tears that dripped onto my engagement ring. The wedding ceremony was absolutely beautiful. Everything I dreamed about during those late nights of planning and hoping and imagining my future. Michael cried. When he saw me walking down the aisle, actual tears streaming down his face, and he didn't even try to hide them. My father squeezed my arm and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," before placing my hand in Michael's. My mother was sobbing in the front row, clutching a tissue like her life depended on it. Even Michael's mother, who'd always been a bit reserved around me, smiled warmly as we exchanged vows. And Emma stood right there beside me in her pale pink bridesmaid dress, holding my bouquet with this serene smile on her face. She looked like the perfect sister, the perfect maid of honor, like she hadn't spent the last 3 days knowing exactly how she planned to destroy me. I'd barely slept since I recorded that conversation. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice saying those words. She took everything from me. I debated canceling everything, running away, confronting her privately. But Michael and I had already talked about being honest, about facing hard things together, and somehow I knew I needed to let this play out. I needed everyone to see the truth. The reception started perfectly, too. Our first dance was magical. Michael held me close and whispered, "I can't believe you're my wife." And for just a moment, I forgot about the phone in my dress pocket with that recording stored safely inside. Dinner was delicious. The speeches from Michael's best man were funny and sweet. People laughed and clinked their glasses and told us how beautiful everything was. I kept glancing at Emma across the room, watching her smile and chat with relatives and play the role of supportive sister so convincingly that I almost questioned whether I'd imagined that phone call. Then it was time for the maid of honor toast. Emma stood up, champagne glass in hand, and the room fell silent. All 300 guests turned to look at her. She looked radiant in the soft lighting, confident and poised like she was born for moments like this. I've been Maya's sister for 28 years. She began, and her voice was warm and full of affection. We've been through everything together. Shared a bedroom growing up. Fought over clothes and makeup and who got to use the bathroom first. People chuckled. I felt Michael's hand tighten around mine under the table. I've watched my sister grow into this amazing woman, Emma continued. She's always been the responsible one. The one everyone could count on. The one who colored inside the lines and followed every rule. Something in her tone shifted slightly, just barely noticeable. But I heard it. "Which is why I think it's so important to be really honest at weddings," she said, and my stomach dropped. To truly know the person you're marrying, not just the perfect version they show the world, but who they really are, all of them. The room was completely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. I think everyone here should know something about Maya. Emma said, and she turned to look directly at me. Her eyes were cold, triumphant. Something she's been hiding from all of you. 6 years ago, my sister was convicted of fraud. She was involved in falsifying financial documents at her company. She got caught, went to court, and has a criminal record. I watched the words land like bombs across the room. Michael's mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father stood up halfway from his chair, then sat back down, looking completely lost. My mother's face crumpled like someone had physically struck her. She never told Michael before they got engaged, Emma continued, her voice sweet as poison. Never mentioned it to his family. Just let everyone believe she was this perfect, honest person with nothing to hide. But I thought you all deserved to know the truth about who you're celebrating tonight. She raised her glass with this satisfied smile. To my sister Maya, may your marriage be built on more honesty than your engagement was. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every single eye in that room boring into me, judging me, questioning everything they thought they knew. Michael's hand had gone completely slack in mine, and across the room Emma sat down slowly, looking at me with this expression of pure victory. She thought she'd won. She had no idea. What was coming? The silence stretched out like a living thing, suffocating and thick. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, could feel the weight of 300 people's stares pressing against my skin. Like physical pressure, Michael's hand had gone completely limp in mine. When I glanced at him, his face was pale, confused, hurt. Not angry, which somehow made it worse. Just deeply, profoundly hurt that I'd kept this from him. My mother had her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. My father sat rigid in his chair, staring at the tablecloth like it held answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. Michael's mother looked between her son and me with this expression of dawning horror, like she'd just discovered something terrible living in her basement. And Emma sat there with that small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She looked like someone who'd just completed a masterpiece, like an artist stepping back to admire her work. Her eyes met mine across the room, and in them I saw everything. Years of resentment. Jealousy so deep it had poisoned her from the inside out. And triumph. Pure, uncomplicated triumph. My hands were shaking as I stood up. My legs felt like they might give out, but I forced myself to walk to the microphone at the front of the room. Each step felt like walking through deep water. The room spun slightly, and I had to grip the microphone stand to steady myself. "Thank you for that, Emma," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. How calm. Like I was commenting on the weather instead of having my deepest shame exposed to everyone I loved. That was really something. I took a breath, a deep one that filled my lungs completely. "What my sister said is true," I continued, and I heard gasps ripple through the crowd. "When I was 22 years old, I made a terrible mistake. I was asked to falsify financial documents at the company where I worked. And instead of refusing, instead of standing up for what was right, I did it. I broke the law." Michael's eyes were locked on mine now. I couldn't read his expression, but he was listening. That had to count for something. I faced the legal consequences for that choice. I cooperated fully with investigators, accepted responsibility, and received a suspended sentence and community service. And then I spent 6 years rebuilding my entire life from nothing. I changed careers. I went back to school. I worked 3 jobs to pay off my debts. I volunteered with at-risk youth to try to give back, to try to make up for what I'd done. My voice cracked slightly. But I pushed through. Should have told you. "Michael," I said, looking directly at my husband. My brand new husband whose wedding day I'd just ruined. Before we got engaged, before we planned this wedding, before we stood up there and made promises to each other, I was afraid. Terrified, actually. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid you'd realize you could do better than someone with my past. That fear doesn't excuse keeping it from you, and I am so, so sorry." Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't wipe them away. "But," I said, and my voice got stronger, "I think everyone should also know why Emma chose to share this information today. In this way. In front of all of you. I pulled my phone from the hidden pocket in my wedding dress. My hands were still shaking, but my resolve was solid steel. 3 days ago, I came home early from a dress fitting. Emma was in my house on the phone, and she didn't know I was there. I recorded part of her conversation, and I think you all need to hear it. Emma's face drained of all color. She stood up halfway, her mouth opening, but no sound came out. The DJ looked confused when I walked over to him, but he helped me connect my phone to the sound system. My heart was hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Then I pressed play. Emma's voice filled the entire reception hall, crystal clear through the expensive speakers we'd rented. I'm going to tell everyone during the toast about the fraud conviction. Can you imagine? Perfect Maya, the bride everyone thinks is so accomplished and put together, is actually a criminal. I watched people's faces change as they listened. Shock, confusion, then slowly understanding. And disgust. She took everything from me, Jessica. Everything. The recording played for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Every word of Emma's confession. Her jealousy. Her resentment. Her calculated plan to destroy me on what should have been the happiest day of my life, when it ended. The silence was even heavier than before. The recording ended with a soft click, and for a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The silence was so complete. Could hear the ice melting in people's drinks. Then my father's voice cut through the room like a knife. Emma, leave. I'd never heard him sound like that before. Not angry exactly. Something deeper. Something that sounded like grief and disappointment mixed together into something unbearable. His voice cracked on her name. Emma's face had transformed from pale to chalk white. She stood frozen at her table, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words that wouldn't come. Her hands clutched at her champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Dad, I can explain, she finally managed, and her voice sounded so small, so young, like she was 7 years old again, caught doing something wrong and desperately trying to talk her way out of consequences. There's nothing to explain, my mother said quietly, and I saw tears streaming down her face. We all just heard exactly what you think of your sister, what you've been planning, what you're capable of. Emma looked around the room desperately, searching for an ally, for anyone who might take her side. But people were looking away, shaking their heads, whispering to each other with expressions of disbelief and disgust. I need you to leave, my father repeated, and he stood up from his chair. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. Right now? Emma grabbed her purse with shaking hands. She looked at me one last time, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Not just shame or anger, but something that looked almost like fear. Like she was just now realizing what she'd lost. What she'd destroyed. She walked out through the side door. Her heels clicking rapidly against the floor, almost running. The door closed behind her with a soft thud that felt incredibly final. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Michael pushed his chair back and stood up. Can we talk? He asked me quietly, privately. My heart sank into my stomach. This was it. The moment where he told me he needed time, space, and annulment. That he couldn't trust someone who'd kept such a massive secret from him. We walked out to the venue's garden in complete silence. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and pink. It should have been romantic. Instead, it felt like walking to my own execution. Michael stopped near the fountain and turned to face me. His eyes were red like he'd been holding back tears. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, and his voice broke. Not about the conviction itself. I can understand making a mistake when you were young. I can understand that people change and grow. But why didn't you trust me with it? Why didn't you trust us? The question hit me harder than any accusation could have. Because he was right. It wasn't about the fraud itself. It was about the fact that I'd looked at this man, this person who loved me and wanted to build a life with me, and decided he couldn't handle the truth of who I'd been. I was ashamed, I whispered, and fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. Every time I looked at you, I saw this good man, this honest man who'd never broken the law or hurt anyone, and I felt like I was tricking you. Like if you really knew me, all of me, you'd realize you deserved better. That wasn't your choice to make, Michael said, and there was pain in his voice. You decided for both of us. You decided I couldn't handle it, that I'd judge you, that I'd leave. You didn't give me the chance to show you who I actually am. It was right. Completely, devastatingly right. I've spent the last 3 days knowing what Emma was going to do, I admitted. I could have told you then. Could have prepared you, but I was still so scared of seeing disappointment in your eyes that I let you walk into that room completely blindsided. Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from when he was trying to process something difficult. I'm hurt, he said finally. Really hurt. Not because of what you did 6 years ago, but because we've been together for 3 years, engaged for 1, and you never trusted me enough to share this. I know, I said, and my voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. We stood there in the fading light, and I waited for him to say it was over. That trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt. Instead, he took both my hands in his. I wish you'd told me, he said, looking directly into my eyes. Not because it changes how I feel about you, but because you shouldn't have carried that alone. We're supposed to be partners, Maya. Partners share the hard stuff, the scary stuff, the things that make us feel ashamed. Hope flickered in my chest like a small, fragile flame. I don't want to start our marriage with secrets between us, Michael continued. So here's what I think we should do. We postpone the honeymoon. We find a good couples counselor. We work on trust and communication and building a foundation that's completely honest. No more secrets. No more fear. Just us figuring it out together. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. But I need you to promise me something, he said. No more hiding. No more deciding what I can or can't handle. If we're going to make this work, I need all of you. The good parts and the parts you think are broken. I promise, I managed to say. I promise. He pulled me into his arms then, and I buried my face in his shoulder and cried. Not sad tears exactly. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. Or just the overwhelming emotion of realizing that sometimes you finally tell the truth. The people who really love you don't leave. They stay, they hold you. They choose you anyway.